The sun had barely risen over the mountain, casting long shadows over the ancient Buddhist temple at its foot. A monk, his face marked by time and wisdom, knelt before a statue of Buddha. His hands, once steady, trembled as he traced the worn lines of the sculpture. The temple was silent, save for the occasional rustling of wind in the trees. But then, without warning, a crack split the air. The Buddha statue, revered for centuries, trembled on its pedestal, and then, in a sudden crash, it shattered into countless pieces. The monk's heart skipped a beat as he gazed at the broken fragments. The stillness was replaced by a deep, sorrowful emptiness. He whispered, his voice thick with uncertainty, "The world is changing, but what is left of us?" The weight of his words hung heavy in the air as the broken pieces lay scattered before him, a mirror to his own fragmented soul. In the stillness that followed, the monk remained kneeling, his thoughts spinning like a whirlwind. Outside, the birds had begun to sing, oblivious to the chaos within. The monk's gaze flickered toward the shattered statue once more, but his thoughts were interrupted as a young monk, Arjuna, entered the hall. His steps were soft, almost hesitant. Arjuna, with his calm demeanor and youthful face, walked over to the monk, pausing a few feet away. "Master," Arjuna said, his voice steady but filled with unspoken questions, "what has happened?" The elder monk looked up, his eyes distant as if gazing into a faraway past. "The world is changing, Arjuna," the monk replied, his voice heavy. "This temple, and everything we have held dear, may no longer serve us. We must ask ourselves, what is left after the fall?" His gaze drifted to the fractured pieces before him. Arjuna stood in silence, pondering the gravity of the words. Arjuna's mind wandered, heavy with confusion. His path had always seemed clear: meditation, discipline, asceticism. But now, in the face of the elder monk's sorrow, the certainty he once held began to crumble. The weight of his thoughts pressed against him like a storm cloud. He stepped closer to the elder monk, lowering himself onto the floor beside him. "But Master," Arjuna said softly, "isn't this what we have been taught? To seek enlightenment through self-denial, through devotion?" The elder monk's eyes softened. "Yes," he replied, "but sometimes even the most sacred teachings must be questioned. Can we truly find peace by holding on to our old ways when the world is changing? We must learn to let go. Only then will we find what is left, Arjuna." The weight of those words hung heavily in the air, and for the first time, Arjuna began to wonder if his life of devotion had been leading him towards something more than he had imagined. The monk rose slowly, the weight of his years reflected in every movement. He glanced at Arjuna and spoke with a quiet, steady voice. "There is something you must understand, Arjuna. The path to enlightenment is not always clear, nor is it linear." He paused, casting one last look at the broken pieces of the statue. "Sometimes, the world we have built for ourselves crumbles, and we must begin anew. Do you feel it, Arjuna? The pull to question everything?" Arjuna nodded, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. "I do," he whispered, "but I am afraid, Master. Afraid of what it means to let go of everything we have believed in." The elder monk smiled softly, placing a hand on Arjuna's shoulder. "Fear is natural, but it is in that fear that we find our true strength. It is time to let go, my son." Arjuna stood, feeling a deep sense of loss and confusion, but also an undeniable urge to discover more. He turned toward the doorway, stepping outside into the temple garden. The garden was peaceful, serene, with lotus flowers floating serenely on the surface of the pond. He walked along the stone path, his mind swirling with questions. What did it mean to truly let go? Was the path of detachment the only way forward? As Arjuna walked, his steps slowed, and he gazed at the reflection of the broken Buddha statue in the pond. The pieces were distorted in the water, but the image of the Buddha still remained. Arjuna knelt, his fingers lightly tracing the ripples that formed. "What is left of us when all we hold dear is shattered?" he whispered to himself. The stillness of the garden, the sound of his own voice, felt oddly comforting, as though a new chapter was beginning. Days passed in quiet contemplation, but Arjuna's mind remained restless. The question of what it meant to truly let go echoed in his thoughts. The teachings he had long followed felt insufficient now, like a worn path leading nowhere. One afternoon, as Arjuna sat by the temple's stone steps, the abbot, Venerable Shashi, approached him. His presence was steady, calm. "Arjuna," he began, his voice warm yet firm, "I have seen the change within you. You seek something beyond what we have known here. It is time to step into your new role. The monks need guidance, and I believe you can lead them." Arjuna's heart raced at the suggestion, his mind filled with doubt. "But I am not ready, Venerable," he replied, his voice shaky. "How can I lead when I am still searching?" Shashi smiled, his eyes kind. "It is only through seeking that we truly begin to understand. Lead with an open heart, Arjuna, and the path will reveal itself." Arjuna's mind continued to churn even after the abbot's words. He wandered through the temple garden, seeking clarity. The vibrant colors of the flowers, the serene pond, the sound of birds, everything seemed so peaceful, yet his heart felt like a storm. As he gazed into the water, the reflection of the broken Buddha statue stared back at him, distorted by the ripples. He could feel a pull, a silent whisper urging him to go beyond what he knew, to search for something deeper. And then, as if in response to his thoughts, Arjuna overheard two monks speaking in hushed tones nearby. They spoke of an ancient scroll, hidden deep within the temple, said to contain secrets of enlightenment beyond the traditional teachings. A fire stirred in Arjuna's chest. Could this be the answer he had been searching for? Should he follow the path of tradition, or venture into the unknown? The whispers of the scroll consumed Arjuna. Late one evening, under the cover of darkness, he ventured into the forbidden archives of the temple. The air was thick with dust, and the stone walls seemed to close in on him as he moved deeper into the hidden chamber. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Arjuna found it, an old, sealed scroll. It was wrapped in a faded cloth, its surface etched with ancient symbols. His hands shook as he carefully unwrapped it, the faint smell of parchment filling the air. As he unfurled the scroll, the text within was unlike anything he had ever read. It spoke of a different path to enlightenment, one not through asceticism or devotion, but through detachment, sacrifice, and the destruction of the self. Arjuna's breath caught in his throat. This was not the way he had been taught. This was dangerous, forbidden. Yet, it called to him. Could this be the truth he had been seeking? The scroll's teachings weighed heavily on Arjuna's heart. The path it described was one of ultimate detachment, of letting go of everything, even one's humanity. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. But there was another part of him, a part that was drawn to the promise of deeper enlightenment. The next morning, he stood before the temple's altar, holding the scroll tightly in his hands. As he knelt to meditate, his mind whirled with conflicting thoughts. "Can I truly let go of everything?" he asked himself, his voice a whisper in the silent temple. The teachings were so different from everything he had known, but the allure of deeper truth was undeniable. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing upon him. To follow this path would mean abandoning all he had believed in, everything he had ever known. Could he do it? Or would he turn away from this temptation? As Arjuna sat in quiet meditation, the temple bells tolled in the distance, marking the passing of another day. His mind was still in turmoil, caught between two worlds, the teachings of the Buddha, which had sustained him, and the forbidden knowledge he had uncovered. He had never felt so torn. In the stillness, he suddenly felt the presence of Venerable Shashi. The abbot had been quietly observing Arjuna for some time, sensing the inner conflict that had taken root within him. "Arjuna," Shashi said, his voice gentle yet firm, "you are standing at the crossroads. The path you choose will define you. But remember, true enlightenment is not found in knowledge alone. It is found in the willingness to let go. You must learn to trust, not in the scroll or the teachings, but in the silence within your own heart." Arjuna's eyes closed as the words sank in. The decision before him was not one of knowledge or power, it was one of letting go, of surrendering to the unknown. The days passed in a blur for Arjuna. He had returned to his meditation, but his mind remained clouded with the forbidden scroll's teachings. The more he pondered the path it described, the more it seemed to pull at the very core of his being. He could no longer ignore the truth it held: enlightenment through detachment, through destruction of the self. The weight of this knowledge grew heavier with each passing moment. One evening, as Arjuna sat in deep thought by the temple's stone steps, Venerable Shashi approached. "Arjuna," the abbot said softly, "I can see the storm within you. You seek something, but you do not yet know what it is." Arjuna looked up, his eyes filled with conflict. "I am torn, Master. The scroll, it speaks of a deeper truth, but it also frightens me." Shashi nodded slowly. "The truth often frightens us, Arjuna, but it is only through embracing fear that we can truly understand." The following morning, Arjuna walked alone through the temple's serene garden, seeking solace in the stillness. The lotus flowers floated gracefully on the pond, their delicate petals gleaming under the rising sun. Yet, even the beauty of the garden could not calm the storm inside him. He was caught between two paths, the teachings he had always followed, and the promise of something deeper, more profound. As he knelt beside the pond, gazing at his reflection, Arjuna wondered if the Buddha's teachings were enough. Could he find true peace through devotion alone? Or was there something more, something beyond the temple walls, waiting to be discovered? The reflection of the broken Buddha statue in the water seemed to mock him, its distorted image a symbol of his own inner turmoil. The stillness of the garden could not silence the questions that burned within him. That evening, Arjuna made a decision. He would seek out the forbidden knowledge in the scroll, not just for the sake of power, but to understand the truth it promised. As he entered the temple's hidden archives once more, the air was thick with the smell of ancient parchment and dust. The scroll lay where he had left it, its darkened cloth almost beckoning him. Arjuna took it into his hands, his breath shallow with anticipation. The moment he unwrapped it again, the words seemed to glow with an unsettling intensity. This time, as he read, he began to understand the depth of its meaning. Enlightenment, the scroll claimed, could only be achieved through detachment, the destruction of everything that bound the self to the world. The more Arjuna read, the clearer it became. This was not just knowledge, it was a call to sacrifice everything. He felt his heart race with both fear and excitement. Was he ready for this? The weight of the scroll's teachings bore down on Arjuna. He could feel himself at the edge of something monumental. The temple, the teachings, and even his own identity seemed fragile, like they could be destroyed in an instant. But there was still a flicker of doubt within him. Would this path truly bring him the peace he sought, or would it consume him? The next day, he returned to the temple garden, where the world seemed both familiar and alien. The pond, the flowers, the trees, all seemed unchanged. Yet Arjuna felt as though he was seeing them for the first time, through a veil of uncertainty. As he sat by the pond, his mind raced. The scroll had spoken of letting go of everything, but was that really the answer? Could he truly abandon his humanity, his desires, his sense of self? The questions swirled within him like a tempest, but there was one thing he knew for sure: whatever decision he made, it would change him forever. The following night, as Arjuna lay awake in his quarters, the sound of distant temple bells echoed in the air, marking the passage of time. He could no longer sleep, his mind constantly racing with the thoughts of the scroll's teachings. The sacrifice, the detachment, was it worth the cost? And yet, in the silence, a new understanding began to take root. Perhaps the path to enlightenment was not about the destruction of the self, but the letting go of attachment to it. As dawn approached, Arjuna made his decision. He would not destroy his humanity, but he would learn to let go of his attachment to it. The path would not be easy, and the journey would require sacrifice, but he was ready. With newfound resolve, Arjuna rose from his bed and walked to the temple's altar, where the broken Buddha statue still lay in fragments. He knelt before it, offering his heart in silent prayer. The temple bells tolled once more, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in his journey. Arjuna's decision to let go of his attachment to the self weighed on him as he continued his journey toward understanding. The path was not clear, but he felt a subtle shift within his heart. The temple, once a place of comfort and certainty, now felt different, almost distant, as if he were no longer part of it. Days passed in solitude, and with each one, the pain of detachment grew. Yet, a sense of peace began to emerge, like a soft whisper amidst the turmoil. One morning, as the temple bells tolled, Arjuna sat before the broken Buddha statue, reflecting on his journey. Venerable Shashi approached him silently, as if sensing the change. "Arjuna," Shashi said, his voice gentle yet full of understanding, "the truth you seek is not found in knowledge alone. It is found in the quiet acceptance of what is, in the ability to let go of even the need for enlightenment itself." Arjuna nodded slowly, the weight of the abbot's words settling into his soul. As the days grew colder, Arjuna's heart grew heavier. The temple, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, its walls pressing in on him. The more he meditated, the more he realized that the very act of seeking enlightenment had become an attachment in itself. The struggle to let go of that desire felt like an impossible task. One evening, as Arjuna walked the temple grounds, he found himself standing by the same pond where he had once gazed at the broken Buddha's reflection. This time, the water seemed still, unbroken. Yet, his mind remained turbulent. As he knelt down to drink from the pond, his hand brushed the water's surface, sending ripples across the calm surface. For the first time, Arjuna saw the ripples not as a disturbance, but as a part of the water itself. He understood that the ripples and the stillness were inseparable. The realization struck him: to truly let go, he needed to accept both the chaos and the stillness within. The following day, Arjuna found himself standing at the foot of the temple's grand staircase, gazing up at the towering structure. The weight of his decision still hung heavily upon him, but he knew that something inside him was shifting. It was no longer about the pursuit of enlightenment, it was about surrender. Arjuna climbed the stairs slowly, his feet heavy with the burden of his thoughts. At the top he paused to take in the view of the surrounding mountains, their peaks shrouded in mist. The silence of the world around him mirrored the silence within. Venerable Shashi appeared beside him, offering no words but a steady presence that seemed to anchor Arjuna's wandering mind. "The path is not a straight line," Shashi said, breaking the silence. "It bends and twists, and sometimes it leads us to places we do not expect. But it is in the unknown that we find the truth we seek." The days that followed were filled with moments of stillness and reflection. Arjuna continued his meditation, but now it was different. The urge to seek, to find answers, had faded. Instead, he embraced the uncertainty, allowing himself to simply be. The temple, once a place of searching, became a space for acceptance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Arjuna stood before the broken Buddha statue once more. It had been restored, its form whole again, yet the cracks remained. Arjuna touched the surface of the statue, his fingers tracing the imperfections. He understood now that the brokenness was a part of the whole. In the quiet of the evening, Arjuna realized that true enlightenment was not about perfection. It was about embracing the cracks, the flaws, and the impermanence of life. With a deep breath he whispered, "I am ready to let go." The final day of Arjuna's journey was unlike any other. The temple bells rang, signaling the end of another cycle. Arjuna stood at the edge of the temple's courtyard, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The world was still, and yet everything had changed. The burden of seeking had been lifted, and in its place, there was a profound sense of peace. Arjuna's heart was no longer heavy with desire or fear. As the sun rose, bathing the temple in its golden light, he felt a deep connection to the world around him, an interconnectedness that transcended all notions of self. Venerable Shashi stood beside him, his presence a quiet affirmation of the journey Arjuna had undertaken. "The path was always within you, Arjuna," Shashi said, his voice soft but clear. Enlightenment is not a destination but a journey within. Now, you understand. The days were growing longer, and Arjuna found himself at peace with the world in ways he never thought possible. Each breath seemed deeper, every moment filled with a quiet understanding. The temple, once a place of struggle and inner conflict, now felt like a home, a sanctuary not just of stone and wood, but of heart and mind. Arjuna spent his days walking through the garden, tending to the plants, and reflecting by the pond. But it was not a sense of achievement he felt. It was a release, as though he had finally let go of the very need to attain. One morning as the sun rose, Arjuna sat by the pond, his legs crossed in quiet meditation. The world seemed to open before him, vast and uncontained, like the sky above. "There is no longer a self to find," Arjuna whispered softly, the words not born from knowledge, but from a deep, inherent truth. He had let go, and in doing so, he had found freedom. As the days passed, Arjuna's understanding of the teachings deepened. He no longer sought enlightenment in the distant future, or in grand achievements. The wisdom he had been searching for all his life was found in the simplicity of the present moment. The temple bells tolled softly, signaling the start of the morning rituals. Arjuna walked through the temple corridors, feeling a quiet harmony with everything around him. He could sense the presence of Venerable Shashi nearby, watching him from a distance. Arjuna had come to understand that the abbot had been guiding him all along, not by speaking the right words, but by offering his presence, his stillness. "Master," Arjuna said one day, as they sat together under the shade of the temple's ancient trees, "I have come to realize that enlightenment was never something I could grasp. It was always here, in the quiet acceptance of all things." Shashi smiled, his eyes filled with quiet approval. The temple had become a reflection of Arjuna's inner peace. There was no longer a need to search for something beyond the present moment. The world around him seemed to shimmer with life, every leaf, every stone imbued with a quiet, unspoken wisdom. Yet, the real shift was not in the outer world, but within. Arjuna's mind had become still, like a pond that reflected the sky without disturbance. One afternoon, as he meditated near the broken Buddha statue, now fully restored, Arjuna felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude not for anything he had achieved, but for the simple fact that he had let go. "The world does not need to be fixed," Arjuna whispered to himself. "It simply needs to be accepted as it is." His voice carried a quiet power, not from force, but from the stillness that had become his true nature. As the seasons changed, so did Arjuna. He had come to understand that the path he had been walking was never about arriving at a destination. It was about embracing the journey, every step of it, no matter how uncertain or unclear it seemed. Arjuna no longer sought answers, for he understood now that the questions themselves were part of the experience. One evening, as the temple bells rang and the last light of day faded, Arjuna stood alone in the courtyard, gazing at the horizon. The mountains stood silent in the distance, their peaks touched by the last rays of the setting sun. Arjuna realized that he had finally become one with the world around him, not through force or struggle, but through acceptance. The journey was not about what he could achieve, but about what he could surrender. He smiled quietly to himself, the burden of seeking now gone. The final morning arrived like a soft whisper, gentle and inevitable. Arjuna sat in his usual place by the pond, watching the ripples in the water as the temple bells rang in the distance. He had become a part of the temple, the garden, the world. The struggle had ended, and in its place there was only peace. "Enlightenment is not an attainment," Arjuna whispered, his voice filled with quiet wisdom, "but a surrender." As he sat, the world around him seemed to soften, as though it too had found its own stillness. In that moment, Arjuna realized that he had been the one who had changed. The world had always been as it was, whole, complete, and ever-changing. It was he who had needed to let go. And now, in the silence of the morning, he was free. The seasons continued to shift as Arjuna's journey took on a new rhythm. There was no longer a rush to find something more, for the truth he sought had already revealed itself. The temple grounds had become his sanctuary, not because it was a place of refuge, but because it was a reflection of his own acceptance. The mornings were quiet, and the evenings were filled with the soft hum of nature. One day, as Arjuna walked through the temple's corridors, Venerable Shashi approached him with a knowing smile. "Arjuna," Shashi said gently, "you have found what you sought. But remember, the journey does not end. It only transforms." Arjuna looked at the abbot, understanding now that the end of one path was only the beginning of another. "I know, Master," Arjuna replied, "but it is no longer a path I seek. It is simply the unfolding of life." Arjuna spent more time in the temple garden, observing the world around him. The lotus flowers had bloomed again, their petals a soft pink beneath the morning light. He sat by the pond, watching the koi fish swim through the water, their movements fluid and graceful. The ripples in the water created a gentle rhythm that seemed to mirror his own heart. Life is like the water," Arjuna whispered to himself, "always moving, always changing, yet always here." His thoughts turned to the lessons he had learned, the importance of letting go, of surrendering to the flow of life. It was not about grasping at things, but about allowing them to come and go freely. As he sat in stillness, Arjuna felt a profound connection to everything around him, a connection that was not separate, but all-encompassing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Arjuna sat beneath the ancient tree that had stood in the temple garden for centuries. Its branches reached high into the sky, its roots deep within the earth. The tree seemed timeless, a living symbol of the harmony between the earth and sky. Arjuna closed his eyes and listened to the wind rustle through the leaves. It was in this moment that he felt the true depth of his understanding. We are not separate from the world, he thought, but a part of it, an extension of its beauty and impermanence. The wisdom he had sought for so long was not something to be grasped, but something to be lived. It was in the quiet moments of surrender that Arjuna felt the most connected to the truth he had been searching for. And in that stillness he understood. The following morning, Arjuna rose early, his body and mind calm. The temple was still, as though the world had paused in reverence. He stood at the edge of the garden, watching the first rays of sunlight touch the tips of the trees. There was a quiet joy in his heart, not born of excitement or achievement, but from a deep sense of peace. The world is not something to conquer, Arjuna thought, but something to live within, to experience fully without attachment. He stepped forward into the garden, his feet light on the ground. The path before him was not one of struggle, but one of acceptance, of embracing each moment as it came. As he walked, he felt the presence of everything around him, the earth beneath his feet, the wind in the trees, the warmth of the sun. All was one, and he was part of it. Arjuna's days in the temple continued, but his understanding had deepened into something simple and profound. He had let go of the need to search, to grasp, and had instead embraced the present moment with an open heart. The temple, the garden, and even the broken Buddha statue had become symbols of his journey, not as things to be fixed or achieved, but as reminders of the impermanence of life. One afternoon, as he sat by the pond, watching the water ripple gently, Arjuna reflected on everything he had experienced. He no longer sought enlightenment in the future, for he had come to realize that it was already here, in every breath, every step. "The journey is the destination," Arjuna whispered, his voice filled with peace. And with that realization, he allowed himself to be fully present, to simply live. As Arjuna stood in the quiet temple courtyard, the world around him seemed to have slowed, the sounds of the wind, birds, and distant temple bells, blending into a symphony of calm. The early morning light touched the tips of the trees, casting long, peaceful shadows across the stone paths. He stood there, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of everything he had let go of over the years. The struggles, the doubts, the desire to achieve, it all seemed so distant now. "I have finally found peace," Arjuna thought. But even as he reflected on this, he knew that peace was not an endpoint. It was the natural state when one no longer clung to expectations. As he walked towards the altar, where the broken Buddha statue stood, Arjuna could feel the quiet stillness of the temple. In every step, he had come to understand that everything, every moment, every breath, was a part of the greater whole. As the days passed, Arjuna found himself drawn to the temple's garden once more. The lotus flowers were in full bloom, their petals delicate and soft, yet strong in their quiet beauty. Arjuna sat beside the pond, watching the flowers float gently on the surface. He remembered the years spent searching, the endless questions that had filled his mind. Yet now in this moment he felt no need for answers. All that I needed was already here, he thought. The path was never something to be found, but something to live. The stillness of the garden, the slow rhythmic movement of the water, the way the wind stirred the leaves, everything felt like a reflection of his own inner peace. Arjuna smiled softly, realizing that true freedom lay in simply being, without the need to change, fix, or seek. On the final day of his journey, Arjuna stood once more before the broken Buddha statue. Its face was whole again, but the cracks remained, a reminder of its past and of his own. As the sunlight filtered through the temple's high windows, Arjuna closed his eyes, feeling the weight of everything he had learned. The struggle, the pain, the doubts, they had all led him to this moment. But now, he understood that enlightenment was not a destination, nor was it an end. It was a process of continuous unfolding, like the petals of the lotus, blooming in their own time. Buddha is not the statue, Arjuna whispered softly. The Buddha is within us all, in every moment of awareness, in every act of surrender. He took a deep breath and exhaled, releasing all that remained of his attachments. In this moment, he was free. As Arjuna sat by the temple's courtyard, the world around him seemed to embrace him fully. The temple bells rang, a clear and peaceful sound that resonated within him. The mountains in the distance, the trees, the still pond, all of it was a part of him now, as though his soul had merged with the earth itself. He could feel the interconnectedness of everything. I am not separate, he thought, but a part of everything. The wind moved through the trees, and Arjuna felt a deep sense of gratitude rise within him. It was not for anything he had achieved, but for the simple fact that he was here, alive, present. His heart swelled with quiet joy, and he realized that there was no need to seek peace. It was already within him, in every breath, in every heartbeat. He had found the truth not through struggle, but through surrender. As the day drew to a close, Arjuna sat alone in the temple, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. He had come full circle, from a young monk searching for truth to a man who had found peace in letting go. He no longer needed to define himself, no longer needed to hold on to labels or identities. He was simply one with the universe, a part of the eternal flow. The bell tolled once more, a gentle reminder of the passage of time. Arjuna closed his eyes, feeling the stillness within him and around him. Enlightenment is not a goal, he whispered softly, but a journey within. With that he opened his eyes and gazed at the world with new clarity, no longer seeking, but simply being. As the night fell, the last light of the sunset faded into the darkness, and Arjuna was at peace.